In 1986, three siblings were rescued from a hoarder house way out in rural Indiana. Their parents got arrested. It was big news, splashed all over the headlines, but in the background of one of the photographs, there was this fourth kid, a girl nobody could figure out who she was. No records, no name, nothing followed up on. Now, nearly 40 years later, one of the siblings who was rescued goes back to the house and finds his trapdoor all sealed up underneath the porch. The stuff she finds just flips everything they thought they'd gotten away from right on its head. Before we get started, make sure you hit that subscribe button for more of these true crime mysteries that play out like a movie based on real cold cases, secrets that have been buried for ages, and disappearances that just don't make any sense. August 14th, 1986. Location: Floyd County, Indiana. We're kicking things off in a small-town newspaper office, watching an intern load up these photos from a crime scene that's been developed onto a light board. One of the pictures shows the three Dawson kids being rescued from this farmhouse that's practically collapsing, just filled with trash. But way in the back, close to the porch steps, you can see this fourth kid, half in the shadows, barefoot, and her face is kind of turned toward the camera. Nobody on the scene remembered seeing her. Her image was cropped right out of the printed photo, and she was just forgotten. May 3rd, 2024. Location: Floyd County, Indiana. The rental car just crunched right up that gravel drive, like it remembered all the bad stuff that had gone down there. To drag the car back, Mae Dawson hadn't laid eyes on that house since she was 8 years old, but it was still standing there at the end of the drive, sagging, just weighed down by time and rot. The Dawson house. That's what the papers called it back in '86, when everything just came crashing down. Now, almost 40 years later, the only thing you could hear was the whine of the cicadas and her nerves just crackling. She parked under what was left of the carport, all rusted out. The boards had buckled, and the tin roof was just slumped in the middle like a broken spine. The house itself was 2 stories of paint peeling off, busted gutters, and windows all bleached out by the sun. It looked exactly how it should look, haunted. Mae got out, the gravel crunching under her flats. She was wearing black slacks, a loose cotton shirt, and had a messenger bag slung over one shoulder. She only brought what she needed: gloves, a flashlight, her phone, and the photograph. She just stood there for a second, hand on the roof of the car, trying to get her breathing under control. The last time she'd stood in that yard, 2 social workers were dragging her and her little brother through a sea of beer bottles and newspapers, past a living room just packed with trash bags and blankets that smelled sour. She'd blocked most of it out, or at least that's what she thought. Now it was all rushing back to her. The smell, the noise, the hands grabbing them, the screaming, and the porch. Mae slowly climbed up the 3 front steps, stopping on the landing. The porch sagged under her weight, but it didn't give way. She reached into her bag and pulled out the laminated photo, the one she'd printed out from the microfilm archive down at the county records office a couple weeks back. August 14th, 1986. 3 kids being led out of the house by Child Protective Services. Mae, her twin brother Mark, and their baby sister Bethany. But in the photo, just over Mae's shoulder at the bottom of the steps, stood another kid. A girl, maybe 6 or 7. Long, dirty blonde hair, no shoes, her eyes just looking right at the camera like she'd been caught in the middle of taking a breath. She wasn't in any of the other photos they took. Her name wasn't in any of the reports. Mae had spent 2 weeks going through case files and transcripts. Not one single mention. She'd shown the photo to Mark. He just shrugged and said, "I don't remember any other kid. Probably just a neighbor." But Mae remembered something different. Something deeper down. A tug. A name she just couldn't place. A voice in the dark. Now, standing on the porch again, she looked at where the girl had been standing. The same spot, the same angle. 40 years later, the floorboards were all warped. A long crack ran right down the center. Mae crouched down and ran her fingers along the edge of one of the planks. Soft with a slight give. She felt it before she saw it. A seam in the wood. Not rot, but a division. A square, maybe 3 feet across. A door. She stood up, her heart pounding. The trapdoor hadn't been there back in '86. Or if it had, It had been buried under all the garbage and the silence. The county had condemned the house after the rescue, but her great-aunt Lorna had bought the property for next to nothing. Kept it for the memories, she said in her will. And now, with Lorna gone, the house belonged to May. She hadn't planned on coming back, but then that photo showed up, and she saw her. The fourth child. May stepped back, pulled out her phone, and started a voice memo. May 3rd, 3:47 p.m. I'm on the porch of the old Dawson house, confirming the presence of a possible sealed crawl space or trapdoor underneath the front boards. Visible outline appears original or added before 86. Preparing to pry it open, she stopped recording, slipped on her gloves, and pulled a crowbar out of her bag. The wood just groaned as she worked the metal into the seam. Dry splinters just cracked off. It took 3 tries, but finally the board shifted, then lifted. The trapdoor was real. Underneath, it was just a square of blackness, maybe 5 feet deep. The smell of rotting fabric, mold, and metal just hit her like a wall. May gagged and stepped back. She covered her mouth and shined her flashlight down into it. It wasn't empty. Inside that hollow space was a pile of tattered blankets, old dolls, plastic utensils, and a kid's shoe. A pink canvas Mary Jane with a star patch. On the side, dirt and hair were just clinging to it like it had been down there for years. May just froze. Her heart was just kicking in her chest like some trapped animal. She took a photo with her phone, her hand shaking. As she looked at the screen, she realized something else. In the dust along the inside of the hatch, someone had scratched some words. 4 of them, barely visible under the beam of light. I'm a 4th. May dropped to her knees. Oh my God. Then her phone buzzed. A call. Mark. She answered it, trying to keep her voice steady. Hey, you at the house? He asked. His voice was just flat, guarded. Yes, she said. I found something. A pause. You shouldn't be there. May swallowed. There's a hatch under the porch, Mark, with stuff inside, toys, clothes. I think she was real. Mark didn't say anything. Do you remember her? May whispered. The girl from the photo. Another long pause. Then no. But his voice was different now. Tight. Like he was hiding something. May stood there staring down at the hatch. You're lying, she said quietly. And for the first time in 38 years, she heard him breathe like someone who was remembering a nightmare. I didn't think she'd still be there. May 3rd, 2024. Location, Dawson House, Floyd County, Indiana. May didn't say anything for a minute. Mark's voice was just lingering in her ear, tiny and far away. But those 6 words just echoed louder than the cicadas all around her. I didn't think she'd still be there. Not who? Not what are you talking about? Not May. You're losing it. He knew. May stepped back from the trapdoor, her heart racing. What do you mean? Still be there. On the other end, Mark's breath just hitched. She could hear him pacing. Look, I didn't mean that. You're twisting it. You just admitted something was there. Some of May just snapped. Mark, I found her shoe. There's writing inside the hatch. Somebody was kept here. No one was. Don't lie to me, May shouted, and her voice just cracked through the overgrown trees like a whip. Her hands were shaking. She dropped to her knees again, peering down into that dark space below. You said you didn't remember her. Now you say you didn't think she'd still be there. Which one is it? Silence, then a click. He hung up. May just stared at her phone in disbelief. A wave of nausea just climbed up from her stomach, the same kind she'd felt as a kid when she used to wake up in the middle of the night to the sound of someone scratching behind the walls. She slipped her phone into her pocket and turned her flashlight back to the hatch. The air drifting up from it was stale and sour. Underneath the debris was a dirt floor, all uneven and cracked, with strands of torn insulation just hanging down like cobwebs from the wooden joists up above. She reached for the crowbar again and widened the opening. The floorboards groaned, but the porch held. May clicked on the camera app and started recording video this time, narrating through her breath. Entering the crawl space, evidence of a concealed compartment, found clothing items. A single child's shoe and what appear to be nesting materials. Text etched into the side wall reads, I am the 4th beginning descent. She lowered 1 foot onto a crossbeam, then slowly climbed down into the space, knees bent, flashlight clenched between her teeth. The space was narrow, claustrophobic. Her head barely cleared the joists above. She crouched low, scanning the corner. Where the shoe had been, there was more now that her eyes had adjusted. A tiny plastic mirror, a matted hairbrush, a pile of torn book pages, all from different children's books, most of them faded, some shredded like someone had chewed or ripped them in frustration. May knelt down beside the debris and picked up the mirror. The back was cracked. The glass was smudged and cloudy. But when she tilted it, a faint shape appeared in the reflection. A faint outline on the wall behind her. She turned. There was something carved into the wood support beam, deep and jagged, like it had been done by a shaking hand. Not words this time, but a drawing. 4 stick figures, 3 of them with X's over their heads, 1 left untouched. The untouched figure had long hair and a circle around it. May just stared, her throat tightening. A noise behind her, creaking. May scrambled up and turned off her flashlight. She held her breath. Silence. Then another noise. Closer. She reached for her phone, but before she could dial, a voice called from up above. Distant, cracking like it was coming through a blown-out speaker. Hello. May froze. Another voice followed. Sharper. We're with the sheriff's department. Step out onto the porch. She blinked. The sheriff? She pulled herself back up through the hatch, just in time, to see 2 uniformed deputies standing at the edge of the yard, hands resting casually on their belts. A white patrol truck was idling behind them. Miss Dawson? One of them asked, spotting her coming up from the shadows of the porch. We received a report. Neighbor said someone was breaking into the house. May exhaled hard, the adrenaline catching up to her. I wasn't breaking in. I own the house. One of the deputies, a tall man with thinning hair, climbed the steps and looked at the hatch that was partially pried open. Looks like you were prying something open. It's mine, May said. The house. My aunt left it to me. I've got the documents in my bag. He nodded, unconvinced. Mind if we take a look? May hesitated, then gestured toward the opening. You want to see this anyway. The next 30 minutes just moved fast. She showed them the hatch, the shoe, the etchings. One officer took photos while the other called it in. Soon, a detective arrived. Detective Howard, mid-50s, face all weathered from the sun, wearing a pale gray blazer over jeans. The kind of guy who looked like he'd grown up in town and seen every kind of decay there was. He knelt down by the trapdoor and whistled. And you say you just found this today? Yes. Mind if I ask what brought you back here? May handed him the laminated photo from her bag. How Aaron studied it, his face tightening up. This is from a 1986 rescue, isn't it? May nodded. She's not listed. How Aaron muttered, tapping the girl's image. No name, no record of 4th child. And you're sure this isn't just some neighbor kid who wandered into the frame? May looked him right in the eye. No, she lived here, and someone made sure she was forgotten. How Aaron looked back at the house, now glowing amber in the late afternoon light. The porch boards creaked under his boots as he rose. We're going to secure the site, he said. Forensics will need to go over every inch. But if there's truth to this, he didn't finish because they both knew what this meant. The story they were told back in 1986 was a lie. That evening, back at her motel, May sat on the edge of the bed with the photo in her hands. The TV was on, playing some local news segment in the background with the sound off, but she wasn't listening. Her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. Stop digging. There was no 4th child. May's hands went cold. She stared at the screen. Then she looked back at the photo, at that barefoot girl standing half in the shadows by the porch, forgotten by time, erased from the record. Her eyes were staring right through the lens. Right through May. She whispered to herself, her voice barely a breath. Then why do I remember her name? May 4th, 2024. Location, Floyd County Sheriff's Office, Indiana. The sheriff's office hadn't changed much since 1986. Same linoleum floors, same coffee-stained furniture, same cracked bulletin board where missing posters used to hang, curling at the edges like leaves in a drought. May remembered being there. She didn't remember the layout or the paint color, but the feeling that thick, sour dread was still hanging in the air. Detective Howard led her down a short hallway and into a small windowless interview room. It smelled like copier toner and worn-out air conditioning. "Have a seat," he said, nodding toward the metal chair. "Can I get you anything? Water, coffee?" May shook her head. He sat down across from her, setting a recorder on the table between them. He pressed the red button. A soft click. Detective John Howard, Floyd County Sheriff's Office, May 4th, 2024. Interview with May Dawson regarding the 1986 rescue from 1120 Firebrush Lane and newly discovered evidence of a potential fourth minor. He paused. May stared at her hands. "Take your time," Howard said. "I'm going to ask some questions, but if you need a break, just say so." She nodded. First, he began gently. "Can you tell me how you came into possession of that photo?" May took a breath. "It was in the county archive. I was researching old property records and crime scene documentation. I found the original negative from the rescue." "And what made you start looking into it?" May hesitated. "I saw the photo online once cropped. Just me, Mark, and Bethany. But then I saw the full version. When I saw it, it felt wrong, like something had been erased. And when I looked closer, I saw her, the fourth kid." "Had you ever seen her before that?" "Yes," May said quietly. "I think I remembered her. I didn't before, not clearly. But when I saw the photo, I knew her face. I knew the name, even if I couldn't say it right away, like it had been pushed out of my head." Howard leaned forward. "Can you say it now?" May stared down at the table. Then she whispered, "Kala." The name just settled in the air like ash. Howard scribbled something in his notebook. "Kala, do you remember anything else about her?" May swallowed. "She used to sing at night. When it was dark and we were locked in our rooms, I could hear her. She used to tap on the wall between us. We knocked back and forth." Howard raised his eyebrows. "Your brother and sister don't recall her." "I know," May said. "Mark swears he doesn't. But when I told him I found the hatch, he slipped. He said he didn't think she'd still be there." Howard's eyes sharpened. "Still be there?" May nodded. The detective sighed. "I'll be speaking with him." He shifted gears. "Tell me about what you found in the crawl space. Describe everything." May listed off slowly. "The pink shoe, the dolls, the mirror, the writing on the wall. I am the fourth, the drawing of 4 stick figures, 3 with X's, 1 circled." When she finished, Howard was silent for a long moment. He tapped the pen against his notebook. "We've got forensics combing through the house right now. From what they've found so far, there's no question that crawl space was occupied. For how long? We don't know yet." May exhaled slowly. "So I'm not crazy." "No," Howard said. "You're not. And you may have just reopened a forgotten case." He stood up and turned off the recorder. "That's all I need for now, but May, this might get worse before it gets better." She stepped outside 20 minutes later, her eyes adjusting to the morning light. The parking lot was shimmering with heat already. The old house was all taped off. Crime scene crews were crawling through the shadows of her childhood, like archaeologists unearthing some forgotten tomb. May made her way to the car. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number again. Stop remembering. She never had a name. She dropped the phone. Her hand trembled as she bent down to pick it up. This time she didn't call Mark. She opened her bag and pulled out the second copy of the photo, the one she hadn't shown Howard, because in this version, her finger had smudged something when she scanned it. She hadn't noticed it until later when she enhanced the image on her laptop. Kala's feet were bare, but in the smudged, magnified version, just beneath her right foot, almost hidden in the grass, something was visible, a chain connected to a stake in the dirt. May stared at the image again. Kala hadn't just been there. She'd been tethered. That night, unable to sleep, May drove out to the old property again. The house was sealed. Yellow tape was fluttering in the dark, but she didn't go to the house. She went around to the side, to that broken-down trailer where her father used to keep his tools. It had been padlocked for decades, but the padlock had rusted right through. Inside, it smelled like grease and dead air. May swept her flashlight across the walls. Tools, broken furniture, old paint cans, and then, tucked behind a tarp, a wooden box about the size of a microwave. She crouched down. The lid just creaked as she lifted it. Inside were dozens of index cards, stained and curled, each with a date and a name, except for one, just a card with a date, July 12th, 1986, and a label, unnamed, bright hair, unregistered. May felt her blood just go. Cold. They had cataloged her like she was property, and they never gave her a name. May 5th, 2024. Location: 1120 Firebrush Lane, Floyd County, Indiana. The forensics truck rolled up just after 9:00 a.m., tires crunching against the gravel as a team of crime scene techs stepped out. May stood at the edge of the overgrown yard, arms folded, watching the dust settle around the yellow tape. She hadn't slept. After finding that index card in the trailer, unnamed, bright hair, unregistered, she sat in her motel room the rest of the night just staring at it, holding it, turning it over in her hands like it was some relic. It wasn't just the words, it was what it implied. Kala had been documented, known, cataloged like the rest of them, and yet somehow erased. Detective Howard spotted her and motioned her over. "We're about to go into the porch," he said. "You don't have to be here for this." "I do," May replied. He didn't argue. The crime scene crew had widened the trap door that May had uncovered. A plywood rig was supporting the weak boards surrounding it, and the interior cavity had been scanned for structural safety. Underneath the porch, the crawl space extended further than May had originally realized, an L-shaped bend in the back that curved under the stairs. "Anything you want to tell us before we go in?" one of the techs asked, snapping on a pair of nitrile gloves. May hesitated. She carved drawings into the wood names. At least I think she tried to look for the word Kala and anything chained to the beams. The tech nodded and ducked down. May crouched nearby, watching through the open trapdoor as they swept their flashlights across the dark. Dust swirled. Beetles skittered. "Then, Detective," one of the techs called out. His voice was tight. "You should see this." Howard went down first. May followed. The crawl space had changed since she'd last been in it. It wasn't just cleaned out, but expanded. More of the space had been cleared by the techs, and beneath the porch steps was a shallow dugout pit, for feet wide, about 2 feet deep. A child's mattress lay across it, all molded and discolored. "Jesus," Howard muttered. This wasn't a hiding place. This was a room. The walls of the pit were carved with scores of deep scratch marks, not randomly, but in groups of 4 over and over again, claw-like, desperate. Above the pit, nailed into the joist, was a wooden sign, not a factory-made one, but hand-carved, with crooked letters, burned at the edges. "Princess Pit." May's breath hitched, and the flashlight shifted. Beside the mattress, tangled in old rope and pink plastic chain links, was a pile of torn fabric, a ripped nightgown decorated with faded unicorns. Next to it sat a ceramic dish, and on that dish was a shriveled, mummified bouquet of dandelions, a child's attempt at a gift. May covered her mouth. Another tech called from behind. "The crawl space bend." "Detective, we found something else." May followed them around the L curve. Her knees scraped against the packed dirt. The beam of the flashlight hit something metallic. A small ventilation grill, about a foot across, embedded into the wall support beam. Behind it was a narrow chute. It was impossibly small for a person, but wide enough to pass objects through. On the other side, a dark cavity. "Where does that lead?" May asked. The tech replied, "Maybe, but the house doesn't have a full basement." Howard frowned. "Not officially." One of the techs reached into the chute with a gloved hand and pulled something out. A scrap of paper, folded, yellowed with age. Howard unfolded it. The handwriting was childlike, jagged, done in red crayon. "Dear May, you knocked back. Thank you. I'm still waiting. I'm still here. I'm not scared anymore." May staggered back a step. She remembered it. The knocking, the rhythm. She used to think it was mice behind the wall. Then she started knocking back. 4 taps, then 3, then 1. She used to call it the wall game. She thought it was Mark, but it wasn't. It was Kala. Later that day, in Howard's office, the evidence was laid out on the table. The dish, the doll fragments, the shoe, the gown, the crayon note, the carved beam. "You said your parents were arrested for neglect," Howard said, "but no charges of abuse." May nodded. "They claimed there were only 3 children. No neighbor saw a 4th. No hospital records. No birth certificate. No foster system paperwork." May stared at the crayon note. What if they hid her before CPS ever arrived? What if she was never supposed to be found? Howard looked grim. Then someone went to great lengths to erase her, And we have a body to find. That night, May sat in the motel tub, knees to her chest. The lights were off. Only the pale yellow glow from the parking lot outside the blinds lit the room. She listened to the sounds of dripping. May pictured the pipes and thought of her little sister, Bethany, sound asleep in the next room, oblivious to all of this. May hadn't received a call from her yet. Not yet anyway. Bethany was only 4 years old when they were rescued. Her memories were indistinct, like looking through a soft filter. May once shielded her from the harsh truth. Could she bring herself to do it? Again? Her phone vibrated on the sink. Dripping wet, she climbed out of the tub and grabbed it. Another message. Unknown number. Do not dig the garden. She was never planted. She was discarded. May's fingers trembled. This wasn't random. Someone was watching her. Someone who knew the house. Someone who used the same twisted language they did back then. Discarded. Unregistered. Bright hair. She stared at her reflection in the mirror, her breath fogging the glass. And for the first time in 38 years, she remembered something buried so deep it didn't feel like a memory. More like a whispered warning from behind the wall. A lullaby sung through the slats at night. Fourth is not a name to say. Fourth will be the one to stay. 1 for food and 2 for light. 3 for sleep and 4 for night. May whispered the words aloud, her eyes wide with a dawning horror, her heart pounding in her chest. She hadn't thought of that disturbing song in decades. But now it was back, and she instinctively knew what it meant. Calla was the 4th, and she was never meant to leave that place. May 6th, 2024. Location, 1120 Firebrush Lane, Interior, Floyd County, Indiana. The wallpaper peeled back like old, shedding skin. May stood in what had once been the living room of the Dawson house, now a mere skeleton of its former self. Forensic crews had cleared out most of the decay and debris. Boards had been stripped, carpet ripped. The house felt like an excavation site, but May wasn't looking at the floor. She was staring intently at the wall, where the family's television used to hang. Behind the gaudy floral wallpaper, something bulged, a warped spot, subtle but unmistakable. She reached for her multi-tool and began to carefully peel the paper away. It came loose with a slow, hissing sound, revealing splintered wood and a small rectangular cutout. How Aaron had left her alone for the day, saying the house was cleared for now. But May knew better than that. The house hadn't given up its last secret yet. She tapped the cutout. It sounded hollow. Her fingers trembling, she pried it open. Inside was a cassette tape, unlabeled, covered in dust, wedged behind the wall for decades. May sat back on her heels. This wasn't just forgotten, she realized. It had been deliberately hidden. Back at the sheriff's office, How Aaron examined the tape under the harsh glare of a desk lamp. "Where'd you find it again?" he asked. "In the wall, in the living room, behind the wallpaper," May replied, her voice still a little shaky. He turned it over in his hands. No label, no timestamp. "You sure this is from the 80s? May pointed to the casing. "That's a Fuji FXI. That specific shell design was only made between 1984 and 1987. Howard nodded, mildly impressed. "You know your tapes." She didn't tell him that she used to record lullabies for Bethany on similar tapes, or that her father used to force them to listen to sermons he recorded from the radio, always over blank cassettes, always without labels. He didn't want them to know what was coming. How Aaron called in a forensics technician and had the tape loaded into a refurbished player used for digitizing evidence. Static, a hiss, then a low, ominous tone, then a man's voice. Familiar, cold, monotone. "This is documentation. Subject 4 continues to resist sleep and food conditioning. Isolation protocol resumed. Night light revoked." May's blood ran cold. Behavior inconsistent with siblings. Subject exhibits defiant traits not suitable for transition. There was a pause, then a faint whimpering in the background. A child's voice, barely audible. "Please, I'll be good." May covered her mouth, trying not to scream. The man's voice resumed, devoid of emotion. "Begin reinforcement cycle. Repeat the rhyme." Then a chorus of 3 children chanting, including her and her siblings. 1 for food and 2 for light, 3 for sleep, and 4 for night. The tape hissed. A faint click. The recording began to loop again. The tech quickly paused the tape. Aaron stared at the device as if it had suddenly grown teeth. That voice. May whispered, her voice trembling. It's my father. He recorded everything. That's why he had the tapes. She stopped, unable to finish the sentence. Aaron stood abruptly and stepped out. Into the hallway. May sat there shaking, staring at the tape machine. And then her phone vibrated again. Unknown number. She didn't pass the test. That's why she stayed. She didn't realize she'd begun crying until she saw the droplets hit the surface of the desk. That night, May returned to the house alone, driven by an urgent need to know the truth. The lock was broken now. The front door held closed with little more than a zip tie and a hastily scribbled note. Active investigation. Do not enter. But she didn't care about the note or the investigation. She had to find out where the voices came from, the reinforcement cycle, the conditioning. That wasn't parenting. That was programming. She walked from room to room, her flashlight beam cutting through the oppressive darkness. She didn't call Mark. She hadn't spoken to him in 2 days. He hadn't answered her texts or returned her voicemails. May stepped into the hallway. A breeze kissed her. Skin, cool and stale, coming from somewhere below. Not the porch, not the crawl space, but the floor vent beneath the hall rug. She rolled it back. There, just beside the cold air return grate, was a square metal cover sealed with screws. She ran back to her car, grabbed her tools, and returned to unscrew the panel. When she lifted it, a sour gust of air spilled upward. There was a tunnel, a man-made shaft, less than 3 feet high, wood-paneled, drywalled, with soundproof foam on the ceiling and a camera mount screwed into the corner. May crawled in. The air was thick and heavy, but the tunnel led to a small chamber beneath the floor, and inside was a metal chair bolted to the concrete, a tray beside it, a box of old, vintage My Little Pony toys, all brand new, with the tag still attached. Bribes. On the far wall, a cracked mirror etched with red crayon. I'm a 4th. They said I failed. I hate pink. I'm not bad. May fell to her knees, the weight of the discovery crushing her. The scent of old sweat and tears lingered in the drywall. This wasn't just where Callus stayed. It was where they broke her spirit. When May emerged an hour later, she sat on the edge of the porch steps and watched the sky fade into dusk. A neighbor's porch light flickered on in the distance. Somewhere the dog barked. Her phone rang. It was Mark. She answered without saying a word. He didn't say hello, just, "You found a room, didn't you?" May said nothing. She never passed their test, he said. They called her defective, disobedient. Said she couldn't be reformed like we were. May's voice cracked with emotion. We were children. I know, he said, his voice thick with regret. Why didn't you tell me she existed? Mark's voice cracked, too. Because I didn't know until they took her away. They erased her, May, like she was a mistake. I was 7. I didn't understand. But I remember the day she stopped, singing through the wall. They told me it was a dream. May clenched her jaw, fighting back tears. She was real. I know, he whispered. Now I remember. He hung up. May looked out across the yard. And for the first time, she said her name aloud, not in fear, not in confusion, but in defiance. Gaia. And the wind seemed to answer her, like a whisper behind the aged, decaying boards. May 7th, 2024, location, 1120 Firebrush Lane, furnace room. The door to the furnace room hadn't been opened in decades. May stood at the edge of the rusted handle, wearing gloves, crowbar in hand. The hallway smelled strongly of dust and dry rot. And even though the rest of the house had been gutted by the forensics team, this particular door was still sealed shut, not padlocked, just painted over with dozens of layers of old paint, as if the house itself had tried to bury it, to erase it from existence. The knob broke off when she tried to turn it. The crowbar did the rest. The furnace room was small, with no windows and cinderblock walls. The air was thick and heavy with the smell of old insulation and the faintest trace of burned rubber. The furnace itself was a monstrous beast made of cast iron, hulking and imposing, long since disconnected, but it hadn't been removed from the house. Its mouth gaped open, jagged at the edges like rusted teeth. May walked towards it, her heart pounding in her chest. Then she saw it. Nestled in the ash at the back of the chamber was a porcelain doll, scorched and cracked, with one eye missing. Its head was tilted at an unnatural angle, and its dress had mostly burned away, leaving only shreds of fabric. But what remained was clear. A name, handwritten across the hemline in faded red. Marker. Calla. May stumbled backward, reeling from the shock. The doll had never belonged to her, or to Bethany, or to Mark. Her mother had forbidden porcelain dolls in the house. Eyes like spies, she used to say, her voice cold. They watch you. They whisper things at night. So who gave this particular doll a name? She sat on the back porch steps later that afternoon, the doll sealed in. An evidence bag beside her, waiting for Howard to arrive. Her hands were scraped and dirty, and her face was streaked with sweat and soot. He pulled up in an unmarked vehicle, got out slowly, and walked toward her with a look that said, "I believe you now." May handed him the bag. He looked at the doll, his jaw tightening. "I think they burned her things," she said, her voice barely a whisper. One at a time, after she was taken, Howard looked around the porch, the crawl space, the conditioning room. "Now this," he said, shaking his head. "I've never seen a case like this in my career." "She was never a case," May replied, her voice hard. "That's the point. She wasn't reported missing because they never let her exist on paper." He nodded slowly, his expression grim. "We're checking all missing children reports from 1980 to 1986, cross-referencing any Jane does. But if she was never documented, she'll never be found in the system." May finished his thought for him, "unless we find her ourselves." Howard reached into his pocket and handed her something. This came from evidence storage from the first investigation. "You might want to see it." May unfolded the aged piece of paper. It was a floor plan sketch crudely drawn in pencil in a child's hand with labeled rooms. May's room, Mark's room, bathroom, mom and dad. And then in the center of the house, my room but not allowed. Next to it, a series of stick figures behind bars. The figure labeled for was circled. May stared at it, her fingers tracing the edges of the paper, as if she were touching a long-lost memory. "This wasn't mine," she said, "or Mark's. Bethany couldn't draw yet." Howard said, "We found it folded inside a dresser drawer, stuck between the boards. No name, no fingerprints they could use at the time." "It was hers," May whispered, her voice filled with a mixture of grief and understanding. "Calla's room. Not allowed." That night, May dreamed of the furnace room. In her dream, the doll stood up on blackened legs and spoke with her sister's voice. Not Bethany, but the fourth voice, the one that had been scrubbed from cassette. Tapes and photographs and court reports. The doll said, "They put me in the dark so I couldn't be seen. And then they told me I was only real when I obeyed." Then it reached toward May's mouth with tiny ceramic hands. "Give me my name back." May woke up choking, gasping for air, her heart pounding in her chest. The next morning, she drove to the hospital where her mother had been placed in long-term care. Dalia Dawson, age 81, legally incompetent, diagnosed with vascular dementia, post-stroke aphasia, with no visitors in 5 years. The staff said she barely spoke, rarely responded to stimuli, and mostly just stared out the window at the bird feeder. May sat across from her in a plastic chair in the sunroom. Her mother's face was pale and slack, her wispy gray hair unkempt, her hands curled at the wrists. May placed the laminated photo on the table, the one from the rescue, cropped to show only herself, Mark, and Bethany. Then she placed the original beside it, the full frame revealing the fourth child standing in the background, barefoot, forgotten. "Who is she?" May asked quietly, her voice barely audible. Dalia didn't answer, her eyes vacant. May leaned closer, her voice trembling with urgency. "I remember her name." "So do you? You made her say it. You made us pretend she didn't exist." "But she did." Her mother's head tilted slightly, her eyes focusing on the window, on the bird feeder. A cardinal landed on the ledge. Then, soft as a breath, a whisper escaped her lips. for it was too loud. May's eyes widened, her heart pounding in her chest. Dahlia's lip twitched. For tried to bite. Silence filled the room. Then, for didn't sleep. For didn't listen. So for had to be quiet. May's voice trembled as she struggled to maintain her composure. What happened to her? Dahlia blinked slowly, her gaze unfocused. Her mouth moved slightly. May leaned in, desperate to hear her words, and her mother said, in a rusted whisper, "He buried her where the light doesn't go." May 8th, 2024. Location: 1120 Firebrush Lane, Lower Crawl Space. The next morning, May stood in the middle of the ruined living room, holding her mother's words in her chest like a lit match, threatening to ignite at any moment. He buried her where the light doesn't go. Howard stood nearby, flipping through a stack of old floor plans that had been recovered from the county archives. None of them included the Princess Pit, the conditioning shaft, or the secret ventilation tunnel. The official blueprints ended at the porch, as if the horrors within were never meant to be documented. What if there's more? May asked, her voice tight with anxiety. Howard looked up from the floor plans, his brow furrowed. You think there's another room? I think they built this house with places meant to hide people, not things, she replied, her gaze sweeping across the room. She crossed the room and stepped onto the exposed subfloor. Beneath the torn carpet was a grid of joists, insulation, and dirt. In one corner, under where the couch used to sit, she noticed a grate that didn't match the others. It was a rusted rectangular panel held down by bolts, not screws, a clear indication that it was never intended to be moved. Howard came to her side, his expression growing increasingly concerned. You ever seen a vent sealed like this? May asked, pointing to the panel. He crouched down and ran his hand along the corroded metal. Number not for HVAC. Could be access to plumbing or something else. May grabbed a wrench and went to work on the bolts. They were old and rusted through, and one by one they gave way until finally she pried the panel free. Beneath was a tight, square tunnel sloping downward. It was maybe 2 feet high, pitch black inside, and a faint scent of clay and rot rose from the depths, the smell of death and secrets long buried. No ductwork, no wiring, just a tunnel cut into the dirt, shored up with wood panels and rebar, she said, her voice barely a whisper. Jesus, Howard muttered, his face grim. This goes under the foundation. May slid into the tunnel without hesitation, driven by an unstoppable force. Howard grabbed a flashlight and followed close behind, his expression a mixture of apprehension and determination. The tunnel descended gradually for about 20 feet, then leveled into a low, narrow corridor reinforced with plastic siding and chicken wire. A rat darted past May's hand in the darkness. She didn't flinch, her mind focused on the end of the tunnel. The air grew colder, heavier, as they moved deeper into the earth. They reached a dead end, a wood-planked wall sealed tight with an old padlock drilled directly into the studs. May turned to Howard, her eyes filled with a chilling understanding. This wasn't for ventilation, she said, her voice cold. Howard nodded grimly. His jaw clenched. This was a holding space. He radioed the team above for bolt cutters, his voice firm. Within minutes, a tech arrived, crawling halfway into the tunnel and passing the heavy tools. To Howard. The lock snapped with a loud crack, the sound echoing in the confined space. Howard pulled the panel open, revealing the darkness beyond. Behind it was a buried room, 8 by 10 feet, with a wood floor, insulated walls, no light fixtures, no windows, just the smell of damp earth, mildew, and something else beneath it. Something metallic, the faint scent of old blood, maybe, or just rust. In the center of the room sat a small wooden rocking chair, child-sized. May entered first, shining her light along the walls, her heart pounding in her chest. There were scratches, thousands of them. Not words, not drawings, just desperate claw marks everywhere, a testament to the unimaginable suffering that had occurred in this hidden chamber. Then she saw the bed frame in the corner, low and rusted, a cold and desolate piece of furniture. On top of it was a blanket sewn with princess crowns and pink thread, tattered and moldy, but still clinging to its former beauty. Underneath the blanket, something was wrapped in plastic sheeting, its shape suggesting something small and fragile. May stopped breathing, her hand flying to her mouth to stifle a scream. Howard stepped beside her, his face hardening, his eyes narrowed with a grim understanding of what they were about to find. "Stay back," he said, his voice low and urgent. He now pulled on gloves and carefully unwrapped the edge of the sheeting. Inside, bones, small, fragile bones, curled into a fetal position and clutched in the child's hands, still intact, miraculously, was a tiny ceramic butterfly. May fell to her knees, her eyes wide with horror and grief. "I gave her that," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "I dropped it through the grate. When she cried at night, I gave it to her." She reached for it, but Howard gently pushed her back, his touch surprisingly gentle. "We'll preserve it," he said, his voice filled with a deep sadness. "May, I'm so sorry." She didn't respond because she wasn't looking at the bones anymore. She was looking at the wall behind the bed, her eyes fixated on the desperate message etched into the wood. With a fingernail, a nail, or a broken shard of something. "I was the fourth. My name was Kala. Please don't forget me." That evening, the remains were bagged, tagged, and sent to the county coroner. DNA testing would follow, but everyone in that crawl space already knew who it was. Howard gave May a ride back to her motel. They didn't speak until the car was parked, the silence thick with unspoken grief. He looked at her carefully, his eyes filled with concern. "Do you want to testify if this goes to trial?" he asked, his voice soft. She shook her head slowly, unable to find the words to express the depth of her pain. "I want to bury her," she managed to say, her voice barely a whisper. "I want to give her a name. I want to put a stone in the ground and mark it with her real name, not a number, not a failure." "Kala." Howard nodded, his expression filled with understanding and empathy. "You'll get that," he said, his voice firm with conviction. As he started the car, again, May stared out the window and whispered, her voice filled with a mixture of sorrow and relief. "She remembered me." Back in her motel room, May sat on the bed, staring at the ceramic butterfly, her mind overwhelmed by the day's discoveries. The ceramic was cracked and worn, but the paint was still surprisingly bright. A blue swirl decorated each wing, and a happy face smiled from the center, a small beacon of hope in the darkness. She had made it in first grade, a Mother's Day gift, but her mother had never accepted it, so she gave it to the girl on the wall. And Kala had held it until the very end, a symbol of their unlikely bond. The phone buzzed again, shattering the silence. "Unknown number. You dug too deep. Now the others will come." May didn't reply. She turned the phone off, walked to the bathroom, and flushed the SIM card down the toilet, severing her connection to the unknown threat. Then she sat in silence, allowing herself to feel the full weight of her grief, the overwhelming sadness for the lost child and the others who had suffered within those walls. And somewhere far off in her memory, or in the echo of the bones they had just unearthed, she heard that old, familiar knock again. 4 taps, then 3, then 1. May 9th, 2024. Location: May's childhood bedroom. 1120 Firebrush Lane. May hadn't returned to her childhood bedroom since the day they were taken from the house, the day their lives had been irrevocably altered. Back then, it had been a hoarder's nest of rotting blankets, dolls with missing eyes, and the sharp, sour scent of mold climbing up the walls like ivy, a physical manifestation of the decay within the family. But now, with the debris cleared away by the forensics team and the sun filtering weakly through the cracked window, it looked almost normal, almost habitable. Almost. She stepped inside slowly, scanning the stripped walls, the gouged floorboards, the discolored corner where a space heater once started a small electrical fire, a constant reminder of the ever-present danger they had lived with. The built-in closet still stood, warped and damaged, but intact, a silent witness to the secrets hidden within those walls. Inside was a shelf, where May used to hide drawings she didn't want their father to find. He hated scribbles, viewing them as acts of defiance, signs of rebellion against his twisted control. She opened the closet door and knelt before the shelf, her heart pounding in her chest. Her fingers touched something soft wedged in the corner, half hidden from view. A stuffed rabbit, stiff with age, its fur matted and discolored, its eyes clouded with dust. She turned it over in her hands, her breath catching in her throat. Sewn into the back of the rabbit, crudely stitched in place, was a patch made from pink corduroy, a jarring splash of color against the drab, faded fur. She tugged at the thread, her fingers trembling with anticipation. It unraveled easily, revealing the secret hidden beneath the patch. Inside the lining was a small notebook, wrapped in plastic too. Protect it from the ravages of time. May stared at it, her breath caught in her throat, her mind reeling from the possibilities. The notebook was no bigger than a deck of cards, bound with faded blue yarn, a testament to the resourcefulness of its creator. The pages were curled and stained, bearing the marks of years of neglect. On the first page, in a child's handwriting, was a message etched. With desperate hope, if I'm not here, I'm still here. Find the butterflies. They show the way. I'm Kala. I was loved once. May's hands trembled as she held the notebook, tears welling up in her eyes. She flipped through the fragile pages, her heart breaking with each turn. They were filled with drawings, images of butterflies, spirals, stars, symbols of freedom and hope, a secret language, understood only by the children trapped within those walls. And beneath each drawing, a name. Not hers, not Mark's, not Bethany's, but others' names she didn't recognize. Angela, pink butterfly. Tessa, green butterfly. Mira, orange spiral. Eve, double star. Me, blue butterfly alone. Each drawing was placed next to a number and a location. Under the stairs, under the shed, inside the trailer, behind the wall in the furnace room. May flipped to the final page, her fingers tracing the words written there. If I'm gone, tell them I remember. Even when they tried to take it away at the sheriff's office, she sat across from Howard, the notebook open between them, its secrets laid bare for the world to see. He had read every page twice, his expression growing, increasingly grim with each passing moment. Are these names of other children? He asked, his voice low and filled with a mixture of disbelief and horror. I think so, May said, her voice barely a whisper. Kala wasn't the only one. Howard stood and began to pace the room, his mind racing to comprehend the scope of the atrocities that had taken place within that house. Why wasn't any of this in the case file? Why didn't CPS catch it? He asked, his voice filled with frustration and anger. Because they weren't looking for anyone who didn't officially exist, May answered, her voice filled with a cold, hard certainty. They rescued 3 kids. That's what they came for. Kala was already in the crawl space, hidden away from the eyes of the world. Maybe the others had already been moved, or worse, silenced forever. How Aaron ran a hand through his hair, his face etched with worry. We need to excavate every single spot she mentioned, he said, his voice filled with determination. May pointed to one of the drawings in the notebook, her finger tracing the faded lines. This says mirror trailer next to the fan. That's where I found the index card. There could be more in there. And the shed, she added, her voice barely audible. That was always locked. We weren't allowed to go near it. Dad said it was the burn house. Howard didn't respond, his face grim. He picked up the radio and called in a forensic crew, his voice firm and commanding. Bring everything, he said, and I mean everything. We're not leaving anything behind. 3 hours later, the trailer was opened again, its secrets finally exposed to the light of day. Inside, behind the rusted utility fan buried in a false panel, they found 3 more index cards, identical to the one that read, unnamed bright hair. These read, subject number 5, Tessa, too small, relocated. Subject number 7, Mira, defective, quiet room. Subject number 8, Angela, compliant, transferred. May stared at the word relocated and felt her stomach turn a wave of nausea washing over her. Howard crouched beside the forensic tech, his face a mask of controlled fury. "What the hell were they doing?" he muttered, his voice barely audible. May said nothing because deep down she already knew that this wasn't just about abuse. This was a system, a carefully orchestrated selection process, and her parents hadn't been the only ones involved. That night, May sat in the motel room with a notebook spread across the bed, the secrets of the past, weighing heavily on her shoulders. She'd laid out the butterfly codes, meticulously tracing each symbol to its corresponding location. Each place had once hidden something or someone lost to the darkness. She traced her fingers across Kala's entry again, her heart aching with a profound sense of loss. "Me, blue butterfly, alone," May whispered, her voice filled with sorrow and regret. "You weren't alone." She looked at the entry below it, her eyes widening with a sudden, chilling realization. It wasn't a name, just a single sentence, written in the same childish scrawl. "There was one more, but I never saw her face. I think she lived in the wall." May froze, her blood running cold. She turned to the photo again, the one from the rescue, the image that had haunted her dreams. Her fingers trembled as she zoomed in to the left corner of the image, focusing on the blurred sliver of a second face hidden far behind the porch, almost camouflaged by the siding of the house. Too small, too shadowed to be clearly seen. But it was there, another child, a silent witness to the horrors that had unfolded within those walls. Not Kala, not May, not Mark, not Bethany. Another girl, one who had never been seen again, a ghost in the machine. May 10th, 2024. Location: 1120 Firebrush Lane, West Wall. The photograph wouldn't stop burning in May's head. The image seared into her memory. That blurred sliver of a face, nearly lost in the shadow of the porch column, tucked behind a rotting plank, haunted her waking moments. It wasn't Kala. It wasn't anyone May could name, yet there she was, another child, watching, a silent observer of a life she could never participate in. May stood in the backyard the next morning, the photo printed. On glossy paper, enlarged and circled, a desperate attempt to make sense of the blurred image. She held it up against the siding of the west-facing wall, comparing the angles, searching for a connection, a confirmation of her growing suspicion. The wood had warped over the years, weathered by countless seasons, but she could still make out the exact slat where the eye had appeared. The point of origin for that haunting gaze. Fourth one down, 2 boards over from the corner, she whispered, her voice barely audible. She was inside the wall. Howard arrived minutes later, sipping his usual bitter coffee, his eyes red from lack of sleep, the toll of the investigation etched into his face. "You really think this is another kid?" he asked, his voice filled with a weary skepticism. "I know it is," May replied, her voice firm with conviction. He looked at the photo again, his brow furrowed in thought. "This shot was taken the day you 3 were pulled from the house. So either she was hiding, terrified of being discovered, or she was trapped, unable to escape." May nodded, her heart pounding in her chest. Kala wrote about. She'd seen her in the notebook. The girl said she never saw her face, only heard her move behind the wall. Called her the one who doesn't speak. Howard stared at the sighting report. "We'll get the team," he said. "By afternoon." A demolition team stood along the west wall. Howard supervised, gloves on, flashlight in hand. May refused to leave. They began pulling boards one by one, carefully documenting everything. Beneath the wood siding was the insulation, damp, moldy, and riddled with nests. Then a hollow thud. One of the techs stopped, knocked again, and heard a different sound. Not drywall, not brick, but a cavity. They pulled the insulation back. Behind it was a hidden hatch, no bigger than a filing cabinet door, nailed shut from the outside with splintered, rusted finishing nails. There was no visible handle, just a strip of worn pink ribbon stapled to the top like a makeshift pull cord. The tech pried the nails free. Dust poured out. Then the door gave way with a low groan. The flashlight beam caught a pair of broken slats arranged like shelves, a flattened pillow, tattered bedding, a plastic Hello Kitty cup, and in the far corner, a name scratched into the wood. Elise, May gasped. That's her. Beneath it, a tally. Hundreds of them etched one by one. Some crossed out, some circled. A code only the girl inside would have understood. And beside the tally, marks etched in jagged lines. Asterisk not seen, not chosen, not pretty, not loud. Still here, still me. Asterisk Howard crouched. My God, he breathed. This was a confinement cell. May stepped inside before anyone could stop her. The space was barely large enough to crouch in. The air was dead. Every surface had been clawed at, as if someone spent years trying not to disappear. She found another item on the shelf, a torn photograph. 3 girls standing in front of the house, all strangers. One of them held a paper crown. Another wore a tag, number 9. May turned it over. On the back in red ink. They took the ones who listened. That night, May sat in Howard's office with all the recovered materials. Kala's notebook, the index cards, the torn photo from the wall. Howard ran a hand down. His face, exhaustion etched in his features. 9 children, he murmured, at least 9. 10, she said softly, including Elise. He looked up, his gaze questioning. We haven't found remains. We haven't found her at all. Howard hesitated. You think she's alive? I think she was never meant to be found. May replied, her voice firm. May flipped through the notebook again. On one of the final pages was a butterfly marked in gray. Next to it, a name had been scraped off. Only the word remained, static, and beneath that, asterisk the wall girl doesn't speak, but she listens. And she records, asterisk. The next morning, a forensic technician returned from processing the furnace room. She dropped a bag on the table. Inside, a tiny magnetic microphone lodged behind one of the floor. Vents, rusted but intact. I think she was bugging the house, the tech said. Old tech, but still, it would have picked up everything. May's heart thudded. They checked the west wall. Found 2 more. In Elise's hidden space beneath the floorboards was a cracked tape recorder, its wheels jammed, its plastic warped with age. Inside, a cassette labeled in pencil. Asterisk, I am still here. May 11th, 2024. Asterisk location. Floyd County Sheriff's Office, evidence room. The cassette tape clicked into the deck with a soft clunk. May sat across from Howard in the sheriff's evidence room. A digital recorder was running to preserve the output. The tape had been cleaned, dried, and rewound by techs who specialized in degraded analog media. But May already knew whatever was on it was meant to survive. The machine hissed to life, a burst of static. Then a voice, small, hoarse, barely audible. My name is Elise. I live in the wall. I'm not supposed to speak, but if you're hearing this, I'm still here. May gripped the arms of her chair. They put me behind a furnace first. It was cold. I cried too loud. Then they moved me to the crawl space. I counted the spiders. When I learned to stop crying, they gave me the wall. I was quiet. I was still, so they let me listen. Howard leaned forward, his brow furrowed. The other kids didn't last long. Some ran. Some got sick. One girl stopped eating. Kala was the one who hummed. I liked her. The voice paused. You could hear breath, staggered, shallow. He said I was a good ghost, a watcher, a recorder. He said if I was still enough, I'd get to stay, that the others were failures, that I was functioning static. May's blood went cold. They made me record what the others did, what they said. I had a button. If they disobeyed, I was supposed to press it. Sometimes I did. Sometimes I didn't. When Kala disappeared, I stopped pressing it. Another pause. Then a quiet scratching sound like someone fidgeting with the mic. This is my last tape. If they find it, I'll be gone. But maybe you'll hear me. Maybe you'll remember me. Because if I disappear and no one remembers me, then maybe I really wasn't ever real. The tape hissed. Another sound like footsteps or a door creaking. Then her voice again, urgent now. Don't look under the back steps. That's where they bury the ones that don't listen. Look behind the tree. The one with the broken swing. That's where I saw the papers. Click. Silence. The tape ended. May stared at the machine, fists clenched. She tried to warn someone, even if it killed her. Howard nodded slowly. We need to find that tree. That afternoon, May and Howard returned to 1120 Firebrush Lane with a cadaver dog and a forensic dig team. The backyard was overgrown. Kudzu, rusted chain link, thorn bushes that hadn't been trimmed since the mid-90s, but May saw it instantly. The tree with a broken swing, a twisted cottonwood half dead, its branches bowed like shoulders, and beneath it, a tangle of roots and overturned earth. The dog alerted within minutes. Shovels scraped down. At 2 feet, they hit a rusted lockbox. Inside were papers, yellowed, creased, and water-damaged, but readable. Howard opened the folder carefully. Typed letterhead. Asterisk St. Augustine Center for Behavioral. Alignment. Date, September 1985. Subject, number 6, Elise, has shown extended tolerance to long-term isolation. Receptivity to conditioning remains above threshold. Asterisk another page. Asterisk Phase 3 candidates should be selected based on obedience over emotional effect. Previous failures, i.e., Kala, demonstrate that affection is not predictive of loyalty. Asterisk May stared in disbelief. This wasn't just abuse, she said quietly. It was research. Howard flipped to the last page. A table of names. Asterisk subject number 3, May. Subject number 4, Kala. Subject number 5, Tessa. Subject number 6, Elise. Subject number 7, Mira. Asterisk each followed by a final outcome. Asterisk May integrated. Tessa relocated. Mira quiet room. Elise retained. Kala expired. Asterisk the word made May recoil. Expired, like she was milk. That night, May sat in the motel bathtub with the water off, the notebook on her knees, and the tape deck on the floor. She listened again, not to Elise this time, but to the background. Between the words, between the breaths, was a faint sound. Click, then beep. May scrambled to her laptop and isolated the background audio, boosted it. It wasn't white noise. It was a keypad. She wrote it down. For clicks, pause, 1 click, 3 clicks, 2 clicks. A code. Back at the house, the old pantry door in the kitchen had a lock. Everyone assumed it led nowhere. But May remembered they were never allowed inside. She returned at dawn, entered the code into the digital lock installed after the fire inspection in 1985. 4132. Click. The door creaked open. Behind it, not shelves, not food, but stairs descending into something no one knew was there. May 12, 2024. Location, 1120 Firebrush Lane, sublevel chamber. The stairs wait. Dust thickened with every step, choking the air like ash. The light from her phone flashlight bounced off walls that weren't stone or concrete, but soundproofed foam stapled and overlapping. Layers like a recording booth. The temperature dropped the deeper she went. The silence, so complete it felt like a physical thing pressing against her skin. At the bottom, the hallway turned left. Then right, then stopped. May stood before a steel door bolted shut from the outside. A small circular window, wire reinforced, offered no view inside. But on the door's surface, someone had scratched 3 letters, SAC, St. Augustine Center. She turned the wheel lock. It resisted, then gave with a reluctant clang. The door opened into blackness. Her flashlight pierced the dark. The room beyond was windowless, soundless dry. A metal chair sat in the center of the floor, bolted down, with 2 cloth restraints still tied to the arms. Nearby, a desk. On top of it, a reel-to-reel recorder, wires strewn like veins. May stepped forward, heart pounding. There were 7 reels, each labeled by hand. Asterisk subject number 1 removed. Subject number 2 transferred. Subject number 3 integrated. Subject number 4 expired. Subject number 5 relocated. Subject number 6 static. Subject number 7 quieted. Asterisk she stared at number 6. Static. Elise. There was no player, just reels. No way to listen without processing. But beneath the reels was a clipboard. The top page was a log sheet dated between 1983 and 1986. Each entry was a session. Voice conditioning, obedience trials, response to deprivation, static monitoring. At the bottom, one entry stood out. June 9th, 1986. Induction failure. Subject removed to wall chamber. Observation ceased. Documentation sealed. The date burned into May's mind. That was the week CPS removed her, Bethany, and Mark from the home. They never made it down here. No one did. Footsteps echoed from above. Aaron appeared in the stairwell, flashlight in hand. His breath caught as he stepped into the chamber. "What the hell is this?" he whispered, his voice filled with a mixture of horror and disbelief. May handed him the clipboard. He scanned the entries. This is clinical. This wasn't just your parents. This was organized, and it didn't stop here. May nodded slowly. They used our house as a trial site. Aaron stared at the chair, his face grim. "Why here? Why kids?" "Because no one was looking," May said. "Because no one listens to kids. Especially not kids who were already broken." He swallowed hard, his eyes filled with empathy and anger. "This is bigger than local jurisdiction." May pointed to a symbol carved into the recorder. A butterfly split in half. "Calla knew," she whispered. "So did Elise. That's why they tried to record everything." Aaron pulled out his phone and snapped photos, documenting the scene. "We'll get this processed. Chain of custody. And I'm alerting state investigators." As he moved toward the stairwell, May lingered by the chair. Her hand hovered over the restraint. And then she saw it, carved into the underside of the chair. Asterisk, "My name was Elise." Not static, asterisk. 2 days later, the story broke nationwide. Headlines called it the butterfly case, a hidden conditioning program. Children selected for their compliance. Locations buried under abandoned homes, schools, and church shelters. May's house had been one of many, but there was no record of who authorized it. The original staff files from St. Augustine had been lost in a fire in 1987. No arrests were made, just a wave of silence and a new list of questions. On May 17th, May buried Calla. A headstone was erected at the edge of a rural cemetery beneath a weeping pine tree, carved into it. Asterisk, Calla Dawson. 1981 to 1986. She remembered. And now, so will we. Asterisk, Mark and Bethany came. So did Aaron. A few survivors from similar institutions attended anonymously, leaving butterflies made of folded paper beside the grave. May stayed behind after everyone left. She placed the ceramic butterfly, the one Calla had clutched, at the base of the stone. Then she turned to the small velvet box in her pocket. Inside, a tag marked number 6. She buried it next to the grave. One for Calla, one for Elise. That night, back in her apartment, May opened her laptop. She had scanned and uploaded every document, the notebook, the tapes, the log sheets. She created a folder, titled Project Butterfly, and set it to public. Then she sat in the dark and waited. At 2:17 a.m., a message pinged. Asterisk, unknown user. I was subject number 9. I remember the tree. I remember her. Voice. Where do we go next? Asterisk May stared at the screen and typed, "We dig, we name, we remember, and we never let it happen again." May 18th, 2024. Location, State Forensics Lab, Indianapolis, Indiana. The reel-to-reel tape, labeled subject number 6, static, took nearly 48 hours to restore. The metal casing was warped. The ribbon had fused in spots, but the data was intact inside. A sterile sound lab. May and Aaron sat behind a pane of soundproof glass while technicians queued up the reel. "This is the last known recording made by Elise," the text said. "It's dated June 8th, 1986, one day before the removal." The machine clicked on, then silence, then Elise's voice, calmer than before. "Older. If you're listening, I wasn't meant to survive. They gave me the wall, but I was never asleep. I saw everything." A mechanical hum filled the background. Maybe the recorder, maybe something deeper. They said they were watching us from the center, a place with glass, doors and no clocks. Calla said they took her there once. Said a woman with red hair made her choose between a doll and a wire. She chose the doll, so they called her defective. May's hands clenched. I think they were stuck. She told me to hold on. The tape hissed, then continued. "The last night, I heard them fight, the man and the woman. He said, 'You let her get too close to the wall, girl.' She said, 'They're just numbers.' Then someone screamed. A door slammed. I never heard Calla again." Aaron looked sick, his face pale and drawn. May said nothing. She was still listening, every nerve on high. Alert. I stayed quiet. I pressed the button. I let them think I was still, but the last thing I recorded was someone new, a girl crying in the furnace room. She said her name was Juniper. She never got a number. May's breath caught in her throat. Aaron sat up straighter, his eyes widening. Juniper. They took her the morning you all were rescued. Said she didn't count. Said no one would miss her. I think they buried her under the shed. The tape clicked. Then Elise whispered one final sentence. Please don't let me be the last one remembered. May and Aaron returned to the property with a full excavation team. The shed had partially collapsed over the years. Beneath its concrete floor, ground-penetrating radar revealed disturbed soil. At 3 feet down, they found fragments of a pink rubber sandal, a lock of hair tied in yellow string, and the corner of a child's dress, faded but intact. Forensics confirmed what May already knew. Juniper had existed. Even if no one ever filed her name, even if no system recorded her, she had been the 11th, the one after Elise, the one who was never supposed to be seen. On May 21st, May held a second burial. No last name, no records, no photograph, but a name carved into the new headstone. Juniper, the one they never numbered. That night, May added a new entry to the public folder. She titled it, Subjects number 1 through number 11. Remembered. Inside, each child's name, real or chosen, was matched with their last known location, the symbol they'd left behind, and what little was known about them. Elise, Calla, Mira, Tessa, Angela, Juniper, each with a butterfly. May hit upload, then closed the laptop and walked her window. Outside, the street was quiet, bathed in the soft glow of streetlights. But in her hand, she still held the last note Calla had ever written. They tried to make us forget each other, but we stayed in the walls, in the noise in the wings. May whispered it aloud, then folded the paper into a butterfly and let it drift onto the wind. June 22nd, 2024. Location, Butterfly Circle, National Memorial for Forgotten Children. 1 month later, on a quiet green hillside in Floyd County, a circle of smooth gray stones was arranged beneath a copper sculpture. The statue, 12 feet tall, resembled a child's hand. Releasing a swarm of butterflies, each one formed from salvaged metal. Vent covers, old tape reels, scorched bits of ductwork recovered from condemned houses across the Midwest. At the base of the monument, a plaque read, Asterisk in memory of the unnamed, unnumbered, unchosen. You were not forgotten. You were not static. You were never defective. You were children, and you were loved. Asterisk May stood at the edge of the circle, clutching a worn notebook in her hands. Calla's notebook. Behind her, families gathered. Some were survivors, their faces etched with the scars of the past. Others were descendants of those who vanished, their eyes filled with a mixture of sorrow and hope. A few had driven hundreds of miles just to be there, to pay their respects and to find solace in the shared experience. Some held paper butterflies, fragile symbols of remembrance. Others held photographs of children whose names had never been written down, their faces frozen in time. Mark and Bethany came too, standing a little apart, their presence a testament to their own healing journeys. Bethany had started therapy, finally confronting the trauma that had haunted her for so long. Mark was volunteering now at a missing children's nonprofit, channeling his pain into helping others. Aaron stood nearby, dressed in civilian clothes, his gaze fixed on the monument. He turned in his badge 3 days earlier, unable to reconcile the horrors he had uncovered with the bureaucracy of law enforcement. They called you today, he said quietly to May. The task. Force. She nodded, her expression thoughtful. I'm not joining. You sure? May opened the notebook, her fingers tracing the faded ink. I'm making my own list, she said, her voice firm and resolute. The one still missing. The place is not yet searched. There's more than just this house. Aaron looked at her carefully, his eyes filled with concern and admiration. You really think this was just one site? May looked toward the tree lean, where a red ribbon marked another location being scanned by ground-penetrating radar, the search for truth continuing. "I think there are dozens," she replied, her voice barely a whisper, but filled with unwavering conviction. 2 hours later, as the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the cemetery, May knelt before Collis. Headstone again. She placed a fresh ceramic butterfly at its base, a small token of enduring love and remembrance. A young girl, no older than 9, stood beside her, her eyes wide with curiosity and a hint of trepidation. She was from Ohio. Her mother had driven her 5 hours to be here, drawn by the stories she had heard and the need to understand. She'd brought a drawing of a butterfly with 3 eyes and no mouth, a strange and unsettling image. "It was in my dream," the girl whispered, her voice barely audible. "The girl on the wall gave it to me." May didn't flinch, her expression calm and accepting. "What was her name?" she asked, her voice gentle and encouraging. The girl shrugged, her small shoulders lifting slightly. She didn't say, but she wasn't scared. She said, "I had to remember the shapes." May took the drawing and gently folded it into the notebook, adding it to the growing collection of memories and clues. That night, back in her apartment, surrounded by the files and documents that had consumed her life for the past few weeks, May opened a clean journal, a fresh start in her ongoing mission. On the first page, she wrote, "The 4th child was never named, but she was never alone." She numbered the next blank line. Asterisk subject number 12, unknown. Reported in Missouri. Symbol, 3-eyed butterfly. Asterisk, then she opened her laptop and began searching again, her fingers flying across the keyboard, driven by an unwavering determination to uncover the truth and to ensure that no child would ever be forgotten again. In 1986, 3 siblings were rescued from a hoarder house way out in rural Indiana. Their parents got arrested. It was big news, splashed all over the headlines, but in the background of one of the photographs, there was this 4th kid, a girl nobody could figure out who she was. No records, no name, nothing followed up on. Now, nearly 40 years later, one of the siblings who was rescued goes back to the house and finds his trapdoor, all sealed up underneath the porch. The stuff she finds just flips everything they thought they'd gotten away from right on its head. Before we get started, make sure you hit that subscribe button for more of these true crime mysteries.